Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Fletcher. I'm really happy to be here with you today. Appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to it. I was told that I have 2.5 hours. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah. Go for it.
Take out my phone, make sure I don't go over. So just a little bit of a brief overview about what we're going to be talking about. Basically, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the new threats that are out there, some of the threat actors, and most importantly, I'm going to talk about some of the best practices, recommendations, so on and so forth, to defend against those attacks. So I'm going to start kind of at a high level and talk about it from a global perspective, and then we'll narrow down a few, and we'll talk about some things that are happening now. I'm probably going to walk around a little bit, so if I'm hovering over you while you're eating, please continue to eat. I don't have any real desire or need to stand right over there. So just start with a high level here. One of the things that we have the opportunity to do is to research information about threats in the cloud and on-premise. So a lot of the different questions that we get is, people are a little worried about security in the cloud. How many of you have heard that before? Heard that? Okay. And really what we're trying to do is trying to research what are the threats that occur in the cloud versus on-premise. What is the threat worse? Is it different enough? What's the case for the cloud versus on-prem? And I want to point out 3 of the top things that you see on the slide. First, by far, the most attacked layer is the web app layer. About 40% of all attacks, period. Doesn't matter if it's cloud, doesn't matter if it's on-prem. They're all after web app code. So the code that runs all those external facing websites for your company. The second part is brute force. Brute force is an attempt to be able to guess passwords so they can, an attacker can get access, use a legitimate account, stay under the radar, and then hopefully, raise their privileges. That's the whole idea of the attack chain, right? So these two make sense. So if I can find a vulnerability, say SQL injection, in some sort of web app that you have and host, and I can use that vulnerability to determine user account names, so on and so forth, then I'm going to probably next do a brute force attack so I can figure out what those passwords are. I'm an attacker. Those top 2 items, in my mind, probably won't change until we do away with passwords. Because it's just a matter of fact. The attacker needs some sort of foothold in order to get information in, bring the malware in, or whatever their tricks or trade is. And they need to have the ability to have the right kind of access to run that information, right? To run their code. The third one, here's where it gets a little different. On-prem, we notice a lot more Trojan activity. You see that's listed as third. And then in the cloud, we have what we consider suspicious activity. Suspicious activity is basically defined as Trojan, malware. You can kind of lump all those things all together, but it's stuff that has not been seen or would not be picked up by traditional antivirus. We run that kind of those kinds of files and MD hashes against different antivirus vendors. And that's where we come up again with suspicious activity. So basically, they're mostly the same. There's a little bit of a difference. This next slide is kind of showing a breakdown by vertical. So if you're in any of these industries, you can kind of see where the attacks lie for that industry. Some are more prevalent and make more sense than others. On the retail side, which is about right in the middle, you see healthcare there. I guess there's not a lot of web application attacks going on in the mining industry, but it's there, it's stated. So we'll go through that, and then a bigger picture here is this is a recent snapshot of basically hacker activity out in the wild. This is part of a threat intelligence operation that we have in our project that we use to help with our customers, but we also use as research in preparation and to present. So what you see on the far left side, I won't go through all of these, but on the far left side you see all the attackers. These are the different names of groups, and we'll talk about some of those names. We'll talk about those groups, what their intentions are. But you can see there's different versions of anonymous. Usually anonymous is number one almost all the time. But I pulled this information literally yesterday at 3 or 4 o'clock. And Cracker with Attitude, it was in the news, I don't know if you heard. They broke into some a high level like IT and security advisor to the president, broke into his Xfinity account. So they were all over the news, so that's why they're number one. Usually that's anonymous. I check this thing every day like clockwork, and anonymous is usually number one. By the way, the breach for the Xfinity account for the gentleman that's advising President Obama on IT and security concerns was a spoofed email to his wife asking for the password. And they got it. Not very high tech, but effective, exactly. The other thing you see here is attack methods. You probably heard, hey, Linux kernel's got a problem. Have y'all heard that? Okay, good. You've seen some people shake their heads. If you don't know, look it up. I have actually a slide on it a little bit. I'll give you some more information on it. That's the number one attack method you see right there. And you see other CVEs and other things that are named differently. Then you have all the attacks, the targets for the attacks. Really, that map could just, I mean, it changes almost daily. The United States usually stays pretty red. People after what we got. And then the operational side, basically these are operations that we know are specifically targeting something. For a while there, see there's ISIS, got midway down. Back when the bombings happening in Paris, and there was a bunch of retaliation from that, we saw that kind of sitting in the top 5 for a good month. So it's operation, you know, pull my agenda or make you look silly or, you know, ransom your data. So those kinds of things pop up from time to time. This is not something new, but the whole idea of Internet of Things, with smart homes, with smart refrigerators, with smart cars, and all that sort of thing is very interesting. And I think it sometimes can get blurred. So I want to kind of separate them a little bit. When people say, you know, there's a vulnerability in smart cars, there's different types of vulnerabilities in smart cars, and you see the 2 examples. On the left-hand side, you basically see a user that was able to create their own version of OnStar and make it into a mobile phone app, a smartphone app. So they were able to crack into the OnStar system, and then you can do things that the OnStar system is designed to do, like stop and start your car, lock and unlock the doors, unroll the windows, that sort of thing. It's different, okay? What you see on the right is the result of a researcher working with the 2 other friends of his, and what you don't see is about 2 miles away from this, in the living room, there's 2 guys huddled up around a laptop laughing. Yeah, we made him crash. So this is an attack on what's called the infotainment system in the Jeep, you know, the Chrysler and all that sort of thing. So you heard this was out there, but the media and other people kind of tend to blend them all together. The fact is the attack vector or the attack surface is different, okay? So it's different to be able to do things that the OnStar thing can do than it is to be able to hack an infotainment system, which is integrated into the vehicle. It's a lot more treacherous on that side. And obviously you can see he was going to state speed, but they took over the vehicle, turned it to the left and run him into the ditch. The other thing that is very, very popular right now is radio frequency communications. As you see on the far left on the screen, what you're seeing is a spike in identifying the RF code that's being used by a certain device. Now this isn't just, you know, your car, or your garage door opening and closing. It's not just the key fob used to open and close and lock your door or open your trunk or whatever. It's also, they use RF in things that require a proximity card as you pull up to the gate of a parking lot. Anybody here do that? Well, pull up, unroll the window, kind of scan the card in that area, and then a gate opens. So RF is in charge of a lot more things other than just opening and closing garage doors. The problem with RF is that most of the manufacturers write it in a way that the sequence of the code is predictable. So all I gotta do is get an RF scanner, lock in on a certain spot, let's say somebody's nice house there, three-car garage, maybe there's some golf clubs in there. And I can lock in on it. And when I lock in on it, then I can figure out what the next sequence number is, initiate the command with that next sequence number, and up goes the garage. It's kind of the perfect hands-off crime, physical crime. Because then I can go get whatever I want out of the house or whatever I have access to, go back to my car, down the street, do it again, and close the garage door. I didn't touch anything. So it's one of those things where physical and cyber are kind of meeting together, and the reliance and the predictability and the design behind some of the RF is now starting to catch up with us. So here's some of the latest things. We'll just we'll blast over a few of these. I don't want to spend too much time, but FireEye is a security organization. They have a really cool tool that they use, really good technology. I don't know if you've heard, but there was basically a vulnerability in their systems. It was a 0-day. The patch is available. They responded pretty quickly, and they were even helping customers that were technically out of support. So. If you have a FireEye appliance and you don't know if you patched, you probably should check it. But what's intriguing about this is this. It's not so much that there was a vulnerability in FireEye. The problem really is that the way FireEye was examining attachments that came in email, that's what happened here. It's true of everything. Allowed for arbitrary code to access parts of the device so an attacker could take it over. So here's what's interesting. I could send an email as an attacker with a specially crafted attachment or code to take advantage of this and take over this device. And the weird thing is usually we're like, well, email's a threat when it gets into my inbox, and it's the user's decision on what to do. Do I open the email? Do I open the attachment? That sort of thing, right? That's the traditional threat. Well, in this case, the user didn't even have to read the email. Because it came through the email system and the FireEye device has full privilege and access to all of that, they already had the infection. So it didn't even matter where the message was destined for in somebody's inbox. Does that make sense? So it didn't matter if the user did the right thing or not. You might have the best cyber awareness program on the planet. If you don't have one, you should have one. But the reality is, this is new to me. This is new and different because not only am I able to craft something that's easy to get through firewalls and all those defenses like an email, but I don't even need anybody user intervention to take advantage of it. So it's pretty interesting how those kinds of little things keep kind of popping up. Have anybody heard about the VTech data breach that happened late around December timeframe? Unfortunately, VTech makes games and electronics mostly geared toward children. And then I finally was able to do it. I want to bet I got Hello Kitty on the slide. You guys aren't laughing. Come on, stay with me here. But Hello Kitty, the Sanrio town, did I say that right? Does anybody know? I don't know how to say it. My kids aren't that young. Anyway, it's an online town. It's an online gaming system that kids can log into and I guess do Hello Kitty things, I don't know. But part of that breach included that. The real problem is that it affected, a little over 14 million people, and about 7 million of that, about half of it, were children. So under the age of 18, PII gone, socials gone, all those sorts of things. So it's one of those things where it's beginning to proliferate and it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. The other one I told you about, this is the Linux kernel issue. This is a major problem. If you need to go and check, you need to go check to see what kernel level you're running. You're vulnerable if it's 3.8 or higher. Two problems to highlight on that. First, it affects 66 of all Android devices on the planet. It's a bad thing, so you need to update. The other thing is that this vulnerability has been in existence for about 3 years. Ouch. So it's been there and it's been sitting there for 3 years. And unfortunately, I think sometimes, when 0 days are announced, people think, oh, someone just found this. Not really true. So someone could be sitting on it, taking advantage of it for so long. And in this case, it was a good 3 years. The other one that you see here is remote Pacemaker management. There's a little screenshot of the admin tool. And hackers were able to break into the dashboard, if you will, to control manipulate the entire function of, this is a dummy that they did it on, okay, so they didn't kill anybody. They were able to stop a heartbeat by remotely attacking this web-based dashboard. So it's one of those things where it's like a little alarming, and you think a little bit about some of those things. This is a little bit older news. About 6 months ago, Dark Code, which is one of the dark web forums or hacker forums out there, was brought down by law enforcement. They did really just a fantastic job of coordinating across 20 countries. 300 hackers were arrested. We don't know if they were prosecuted. All the different countries have different laws on it, so we don't know exactly what happened after that. But what's most interesting about this is, one, it was a lot of resources, effort, and coordination by law enforcement. This didn't just happen. This is months and months of work. The other thing is, the reality is that 2.5 weeks after they brought down Dark Code and made all those arrests, somebody else took over admin of Dark Code, and it was back up and running as usual. 2.5 weeks. So, what's the effect of it? Hopefully, 10% of those 300 are in jail or something, I don't know. But I don't know if it's really gonna be that useful to try to take down forums like that. It probably is better to take down like a bot network or something like that. So you take some resources away, but that's just one of those things that people need to know. The law enforcement's out there to do a good job. But the problem is, what's the long-term benefit of that finished job, right? It's still TBD. And then ransomware. Raise your hand if you've heard of the term ransomware lately. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, ransomware is one of those phrases that, as a security professional, it just makes me shudder. And basically, you can put anything in front of, I guess, the word where these days. So what it happens is basically like having your data stolen, it's a data breach. And what hackers are doing, groups of hacktivists and all those sorts of guys, what they're doing is they are encrypting that data. They're taking it from somebody, they're encrypting it, and they're then sending off, the blackmail note saying, look, we have this, we're more than happy to give it back to you, but you gotta give us a Bitcoin. And a Bitcoin, depending on the day, it's roughly under $300, whatever. It could be the Bitcoin, it could be more money, it could be a combination of those things. But the point of it is that their first request of the customer is low. But they always come back for more. So if you pay, you get a Bitcoin, you pay $150, $170, whatever it is, then you may get your data back, but there's no guarantee they don't still have your data. Also, there's no guarantee that they get your data back and it's still in the state in which it was taken. So there's really not a way to win that. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, and this is still kind of being up for debate. If you're paying it, you're just proliferating the thing we're trying to stop. So think about it, have some plans, because they'll come back with more demands for pay, and it'll increase. And so we've seen that, we've seen it documented. They just want to know if you're willing to pay first, and then what's your price. Anyway, so they'll decrypt it for you and give it back to you. The other component, so what do you do to solve this? Everybody, well, how do I get out of it? How do I get to the point where I don't have to pay it and I don't have to declare that I had a breach? One, you got to do some kind of daily offline backups. I know that sounds weird, but you need to be able to do some backups on a daily basis and then make sure that backup is not on your network or not on the production network. Move it somewhere else, have it air gapped so that if you do have it stolen, you have a copy of it and it's not that big a deal. The other thing is there are some tools, so there's good news. There's some tools that are being developed out there, encryption decoders, to figure out how to break the encryption that the bad guys are using. Those are up and running. We have another one here, it's just a screenshot of it, called Ransom32, which is an analysis and a removal tool. Now what you can do is, what these hackers do is they give you a link to the Bitcoin that they want you to go to. So you have that data, you have information. And you can go to this tool, input it, and it tells you what's the normal pay for this type of an attack. So you can see what other people have paid. You can see how many people have paid total. You can see what the increments are, and there's other tools in there. Now, I haven't played with this, and I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm just telling you there are tools out there that are being to help us with this ransomware problem. Yes, sir. It's a website. It's a tool on a website. It's like an analysis engine on a website. I don't have it. They took it off there. There's a good article on this whole thing on ransomware on Krebs on security.com, the security blogger. You guys probably know Ryan Krebs. He has some good information on there. So that's kind of what's going on out there. That's what's new. That's what people are facing. How do we defend against it? What are some of the things that we can do? Some of these things you might have heard of. Hopefully you'll have some things that maybe will help you. You can reach or shore up some things in your organization or in the other community around you. The first thing is all these devices that are vulnerable, or the devices we're responsible to protect, are in different layers, and they have different layers of expertise as well. So on the network side, right, we have all the different firewalls, we have intrusion detection, protection systems, we have all these different devices that are handling events at a high frequency, and they're making decisions based on policy and management. Then on the server side, of course, you have some of, like mail filtering, this is proxy servers, this is all the regular application type servers, that sort of thing. And then on the host side, that's all the hosts that you have to manage as far as laptops, desktops, mobile phones. You have antivirus on those. You might have some host-based IDS or some operating system firewalls, and you have all these controls in place, and it's all good. The problem is that a lot of times we don't get all the information we need from all those layers to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. So data correlation is key. This is probably something you've heard before, but you need to be able to understand what's happening at those different layers and be able to put the pieces together to understand if you have an event or if it's just a normal operational thing. Or if there's something, it's not doesn't necessarily have to be a security event, but maybe it's an IT-oriented event or a problem. So you need to be able to take all that information, you need to be able to collect it and identify what's happening, and then put it in some sort of analysis so that you can understand if this is an attack or not. Once you have all that information, then you can decide there's some sort of a security event here we need to take action on. So in order to do that, all those devices need to have some sort of logging in place. You need to have a log management system and so on. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The other component to this is that, and you guys know this because I'm talking to a room of professionals, it's not just about technology. You can buy the best of breed and have great technology. You can go and you can have a who's who of who's at RSA in the booths and have all of those technologies purchased and delivered and operational. But the real issue is we need to have people in process around that technology to really take advantage of it. Unfortunately, what I've seen in doing some assessments of organizations is that they'll spend a lot of money on the tool. And it's painful, it's not an easy decision. I mean, we watch our budgets carefully, so it's not like we can just buy everything we think we want. But the reality is that maybe they'll make a decision on something like a SIM. I talked about data correlation a second ago. And they'll spend a lot of money on it. They're expensive tools. But then they don't put the people around the tool to be experts in that tool. And then on top of that, they don't have a process in place to be able to handle what happens as a result of the tool. Now, some have some things in place, but there's a gap usually. Maybe you need some sort of expertise that you don't have on staff. consider some kind of consulting work. Maybe you have more data than you want to deal with, which is very happens quite a bit. If that's the case, maybe you should hire someone to do some log analysis. Those types of services are out there for you to use. And you don't have to go all in with giving your security to somebody else and hoping they manage it well and trying to deal with that relationship. You can pick and choose the areas you need help in. But it's not just about technology, it certainly is, but people and process are all part of it as well. The other thing is that it's 24/7. There's no hacker group or hacker community that honors holidays that I'm aware of. So you and I go home and we have an evening, we have weekends, we take time off. They don't. It's 24/7. If you don't have a good picture of what's happening in your organization operationally from an IT perspective on a 24/7 basis, you're missing information. You don't have enough information to make good decisions. It continues to happen, right? Usually at the worst time sometimes. But 24/7 operations, being able to make decisions based on what's happening, so you need people involved in it, is an important component of it. So that's something to keep in mind. The next part is basically 10 recommendations on different things that you can do for best practice when it comes to security. Some of it relates directly to cloud, some of it's on-premise only, and some are a version of all. So I'm going to talk about the 10. I'll go through them pretty quickly. I think I'm doing all right on time. But I want to just mention one thing. This list is in no particular order, except number 1. Yes, sir.
Everything that you're saying thus far leads to the question, an obvious question, which is situational awareness.
Situational awareness.
Are you going to address that as part of this presentation? But any recommendations on situational awareness?
So we'll be talking about recommendations for situational awareness. I would say that's probably the best summary of the 10 things that you see here on the slide. And yes, but not by name. So I'm not gonna say, and this is one of the things you should check off to have good situational awareness. But I'll talk about why doing these things leads to having good situational awareness of what's happening on your network. So number 1, know your code. Is there any programmers in the room? Raise your hand. Not bad, not bad. Okay, good. I do some scripting. I can reverse engineer some code. I don't consider myself a coder. But the reality is, you don't have to know code. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to be a programmer or a developer in order to know your code. What's most important about knowing your code is someone who's responsible for that web app or responsible for application security or something in your organization, is you need to know, 1, what type of code do we use? What version is it? What kind of resources does it communicate with? So what is it needing to talk to and get information from? What is that data? How is it stored? Do I have to worry about it being encrypted? Right? How does that information flow out to whoever's asking it? And then what are the inputs, right? You think about web forms as one of the ways, as an example. What are the inputs to the request for that data through my web app? Those are things that you probably should know and have on the top of your mind. Why? Because in a situation like what we saw with the FireEye vulnerability, there could be something in your code, just the way it's designed, the way it decompiles is the vulnerability. And so if you know your code and you're aware of all those information and you get an alert or notification or a CVE pops up, you should be able to say, okay, this is something we need to address, or that doesn't apply to me because we don't do X, Y, Z. So that's what I mean by that. It's not something where you have to be specific. Also, yeah, I forgot that. So least privilege, we all know the whole principle around least privilege access. You need to know what accounts that code relies on. And what accounts, is there passwords embedded in the code for those accounts to work? And how does that play out? So understanding what resources it uses and accounts it uses is really, really important. The other thing too is to be able to handle like a management process, like change management. Sorry, this is access management. So access controls, this is something I know most organizations deal with on a very wide basis. A lot of users, a lot of service accounts out there, a lot of groups to manage. Obviously, we want to do the least privilege access model when possible. Try to keep it simple, but make sure you have some good auditing in place. One of the things about having an audit for account access is that it's really good to do, and I don't mean that you should depend on the role of an auditor for that. What I mean is sometimes we have to have access to certain projects, or we have to have access to something for a certain amount of time. And organizations are notoriously bad at following up on, does this person still need this access, yes, no? And we need to err on the side of trying to remove the access when possible. Because if accounts get compromised, that's where we have most of the problem. Remember back to the first slide? It's one of those things that the second thing that people are after, they're trying to brute force attack those accounts. So we want to make sure that they're not having access to things they really don't need. The next part is data classification. How many of you in here have been part of a project where you're going to do data classification for information organization? Okay, not bad, about 7 or 8 of you. And was that project for data classification the greatest moment of your IT career? Yeah, exactly, exactly. I was on I got some thumbs down here, yeah. So I was on a project for about 9 months doing this, and I thought I was just gonna never do IT again. It's really difficult. It doesn't have to be, but given all the political landscape of an organization and data ownership and all those things, it becomes complicated. The recommendation is to make it more simple. And one of the things that I've seen that I think is probably a good way to go, just use the traffic light system. It's red, yellow, or green. Don't get any more details of that. Yes, the consolidation of a bunch of green data could end up being yellow, and you need to understand and consider that. But if we keep it simple, then it's easier for everybody to kind of understand what's going on with it, right? You don't have to worry about trying to match top secret, secret, and confidential, and that sort of thing. Privacy Act and all that. You and your organization need to find, a good red, yellow, green light solution for that. Why is this important? Okay, so about 7 or 8 of us have done this before. The end result is that when you have data classification clearly defined, and think about it in terms of apps that you support on smartphones, or VPN capability of people in your organization. When they have access to certain data, when you have a breach, or there is a situation, or an issue, or an outage, you know exactly what kind of data was affected right away, if you have this in place. So that's the benefit of having data classification, especially for like retail organizations. If you have some sort of a smartphone app that you put out there, you need to know what you're asking of your customer. You need to know the data. You're asking for username and password. Is it embedded in there? Some sort of their birth date? Is that something that's a secondary authentication? You need to understand all that, and you need to know, so if there's an issue for an operating system that you support, or in the app itself, you can quickly identify, okay, well, this is the data that's at risk, and then you can take proper steps from that. So that's the big benefit from it. Next one is patch management. We just talked about patches a little bit. We talked about the Linux kernel issue. Patch management is one of those that in some organizations, it's right in security and everybody loves it there, and that's where it should be. In some organizations, people argue firmly that it's not security, it's IT, and I don't want the security people in it. And then you have auditors' opinions. But the reality is, it doesn't really matter where in your organization it goes. Patching is part of security. It doesn't have to be in that group. Right? It doesn't have to be managed by a CSO or equivalent. But the reality is, knowing there's vulnerabilities in systems and patching those systems is part of the integrity in the whole confidentiality, integrity, availability, right? Knowing that your data is as intended is the integrity part. I also throw change management into that because you want to know if your system changed. If you have good situational awareness, then there's an upgrade or there's a change to your systems, you should know that. That's part of patch management. Obviously, you should follow some sort of software development life cycle. Make patching part of your testing it and have a regular schedule. Also have some sort of an emergency schedule if there's a situation where you have to patch more quickly than normal. Try to practice unpatching. It's not easy all the time. Has anybody ever tried to remove like a patch or a service pack on the system? And was that successful? Sometimes. I've just had some people say, yeah, I've tried it a couple times and I've decided that I can undo a patch by wiping the OS and then restoring from backup. That's a way to do it. But you need to know what your way is kind of my point. So some systems unpatch well, okay? And I know that's not the typical language we use, but the reality is some patches know how to be able to remove that layer and they're fine. Some systems don't. Some systems have a little harder time and it doesn't quite uninstall as well as it should. So we won't go into who does what and who's better, but you get the idea. One of the other things that I think is huge to be able to be good at situational awareness is being able to have a good, robust log management system. Now, the problem with logs is there's a lot of logs. There's so many logs, and there's so much data, and there's so much happening every day on each system that our human brains and eyes really just can't keep up with it. It's just too fast. So what we need is a way to consolidate and store, come up with a way to archive, but then be able to search if you want to go back and find where an issue happened. This is where it comes back into that your organization want to do root cause analysis. And this is useful for more than just security. It could be more on the functional side of an issue that you're experiencing with the system. And we don't do all the logging that we should because of this issue. And I remember it used to be, man, hard drive, come on, hardware is so expensive. That's the reason why I don't want to log. That argument's gone. Done. Next. So then the other one is, well, if I log it all, then I'm going to have to review it. Why? Because I know the auditor's going to ask me who reviewed it. So being proactive in having a log management system is important. There are organizations out there, like managed service providers, that will have a log review service. And you don't have to do it. But if they find something that falls in the category that you guys talked about, then at least you have somebody actively looking and using those logs for good purposes. The other way that we log is that we log, but then we just have it overwrite on the system. Because usually we feel like there's not going to be any good information out of there. And the argument back and forth, do we log successful logins? Why would that matter? Do we log unsuccessful logins? Yeah, that seems like it would be important. I would argue that logging successful logins might also reveal to you some patterns of like an attack vector. So, for instance, we talked about before, an attacker would do like a SQL injection, get access to a system, finally get access to an account. Maybe it's a low-level account, not very much privilege, so there's very little risk, but it's an authenticated user. So if that user works 8 to 5 and usually logs onto that system before noon, 2 or 3 times, you can find a pattern through the logging. Now, if you ask that person, they're probably too busy to give you that answer. So, hey, how long were you on the XY system? I don't remember. It's just part of my job. I clicked here, I did that, I downloaded that, I did the thing I normally do. And they'll get it defensive. But if you log it and you have some sort of flow or pattern defined, now you can kind of figure out, well, wait a minute, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Why is that user account logging into that system? And maybe that's not right. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it could be a bad thing, but you wouldn't know if you're not logged in. So that's the argument for logging. The other thing certainly is you need to have some sort of security toolkit. Again, it is about some of the technology, right? But you don't have to pay for all of the technology. There's open source stuff out there that's reliable and good. Depending on the level and the depth of your organization, the decision that you would make to how far down this list you want to go with tools. It also depends on talent and technology and time, resources. How far down do you want to go? Yeah, antivirus, that sort of thing. But do you want to get to the point where you're doing deep packet forensics? Some organizations say yes. Some organizations say, I want to know exactly what happened in that situation. Some organizations say, well, I don't really want to know all the details. I just want the system back up and running. And there's everything in between. I'm not trying to say there's one thing is better or right than the other, because everybody has constraints. But the reality of it is you have these available to you. So there's other tools out there. And one of the ways that I saw earlier that you guys are really helping the younger crew to come up and choose not the dark side and do security professional. I love that. I love it. It's part of one of the things I'm passionate about as well. So I appreciate that in this chapter. It's awesome. Honestly, it's good stuff. But the reality is, some of those younger hires that we have want to play in this area. Open source tools. They want to go and check it out and go see what the tools can do. And a lot of times people will kind of put the kibosh on that. And they'll tell them, no, you got to work in this system, or no, we don't have time for that. Well, we don't want to mess with the creativity of that. We want them to be part of it. And so there's a good way to be able to kind of manage and kind of filter that. So give them the option to do that. So there's all kinds of security tools. You should know what your plan is and what you're trying to get out of it. The other thing is, recommendation, have good situational awareness, is to be able to keep up with the news and know what's going on. Some of the things that I showed you and I highlighted earlier, you probably heard, or maybe heard pieces of. These are some websites that you can go to. You could also go to some of these websites and use them to, launch an incident response practice round. No thumbs up, no happy. This Italian food's weighing all down. Come on. Incident response, don't look at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. Cyber incident response. You can go through some of these websites, okay, and you can look to see what incidents happen, and you can get details on how the breach first was notified. And you can use that against your plan to say, hey, how would we have been notified? Yeah, and you can choose, there's so many breaches these days, you could find some organization that is equal to you in size, maybe a competitor, maybe they're prevalent in one region or something like that. You can find things that are that granular out there and try to use that as a tool to kind of go through your plan. But staying up on what's happening out there is just a really important component. The other side is, and this is more toward cloud, the issue with cloud is that people don't really know, okay, what does the cloud provider provide me as far as security goes? And then what's my responsibility? So these next two slides kind of talk to that. First, we need to understand what your provider does for everybody in that cloud. There's security tools there. They gotta have some sort of firewalls and IDS and some of the traditional network security stuff. They probably have some sort of proxies or reverse proxies set up in a way that helps them to manage traffic. They probably may have some sort of DDoS protection in place. They might come in tiers, and you might have if it's a real concern, you've experienced it before, you might be able to buy a bigger tier, but you don't know if you don't ask. So one of the things that I would ask for folks to do is that when you go and you're talking and entertaining a cloud provider, or maybe you have one already and you haven't asked, well, what do you guys use to protect your entire cloud infrastructure? What's the security tools that you have there? They're unwilling to tell you. I'd say that's a red flag. Have that discussion ideally up front before any kind of contract stuff happens, so that you kind of have an understanding and idea of what that first layer of protection is. Once you get to the point where they provide you compute power, they provide you a database, they provide you network connectivity. But once that one packet goes from their infrastructure to your infrastructure, your OS, is yours. You own it. So the bottom part that you see here, the provider services are all basic things. We're all pretty used to that, and this varies based on the type of cloud provider you have, but this is public. And then on the network side, they're gonna do some things like, they'll probably do some filtering, they're gonna do some VLANing, they might have some, DDS or spoofing or some scanning that might take place, like for email and so on and so forth. But as soon as that first packet drops on your OS, you should be able to do network threat detection. You should be able to do security monitoring as if it's a regular network device. Because all hosts that are connected are a network device. Then the next layer, on the host layer, you're in charge of the root, you're in charge of all the access management controls. You can install any of those OSs that we talked about before. You can put firewalls on those OS, you can IP tables in Linux, you can use some sort of tool to do IDS and IPS on any of those types of operating systems. Logging analysis and all that belongs to you. On the host side, they give you the instance, give you root access, and it's yours. On the app side, this is why you're in cloud, it's all you. They have no idea what your web app code is like. They have no idea, and they're not really responsible unless you have some sort of special arrangement for securing that code. So that's where you need to be most proactive as you see we work our way up the layers there. And then the next one is, we need to know the adversary, right? Know thy enemy. That's a very popular phrase. This is, of course, one of the pictures of Anonymous. There's several different groups out there, and I like to kind of explain a little bit about some of those groups. The reality is that behind all these really cool logos and artwork that you see here, which is really super cool, is people. People generally like each other and get along until they don't. So what happens in these groups is you have an organization that wants to go after an organization and just see if they can break in. They're like, hey, they have this kind of firewall, I have that kind of database, I want to run this code against it to see if it works, see if I can break their system, see if I can steal their data. And that's fine and dandy, right? It's educational in purpose. But then someone in that group says, hey, we stole all this stuff, why don't we put it on the black market, see if we can make money off of it? And other people are like, yeah, let's make some money off of it. And other people are like, no, I don't want to make money on it, I broke into it, that's all I wanted. Hence a new group. So that kind of interaction that happens is why multiple groups start to pop up. Some pop up for a very specific purpose. Some are more educational in nature. Team Desert used to have, I don't know if they're still out there, but they used to have YouTube videos, and they would video them hacking into organizations. They would show you. And it wasn't because they were showing off, it's because they're trying to get more people. They're trying to educate and bring in talent. The other one was, just recently had a discussion with somebody on the underground, and in the forums, I talked a little bit about the dark code forum, there's a couple others. In the forums, the hacker community does something that we just don't do. They bounce ideas off of each other with nothing but pure intent for help. So they can write code that they think is going to exploit something, and then they'll send it off to somebody, say, hey, can you review this for me and maybe clean it up and do that sort of thing. And they love that stuff, and that's what they're there for. And then you start to get a reputation for being someone that's good at seeing what's wrong in the code, making changes to it or suggestions or whatever, and you start to build a reputation in that underground scene, right? So they do that really, really well. If we had, 100 people here, if you guys work in 100 different organizations, would you send code to somebody in a different organization to check to see if you're doing the right thing or to get a peer review? No. I'll answer, no. And that's an issue, we talk about information sharing, you see a lot of things written about it, how do we do it, how can it be more effective? The reality is we live in a different world. In these hacker communities, they have really kind of nothing to lose. You've probably heard the term, we have to get it right all the time, they just got to get it right once. That's what they're building for. And they have peer review process and people that are drawn to this and want to get it better and efficient and faster and slimmer, and they want to throw things in it like encryption, they want to throw stuff in it like anti-malware detection, And once you combine all those resources, that's how that code is so fantastic, or I mean, I guess, bad, once it gets released. And when you look at some of the things and some of the exploits that are written, if you've ever done that, and you're like, man, these guys are smart. And it's true. And they have other smart people helping them right alongside, right? So it's like, you know, a study group sort of thing in college. You sit around, you're getting ready for midterms or something like that. And I would always try to be with all the smartest people, and it would help me be smarter. And so for a time, I was kind of with them in that level of intelligence, right? It's multiplied that effect in the hacker community. And that's why we end up with so many groups with different agendas, and why their code is very clean, very sharp, battle tested, so to speak. So that's all about all information I have. There's a little more information if you didn't get the slides with sites to go to. That's up there on the left, top right-hand side. You're looking on the right-hand side. Please follow us. We do some interesting things on Twitter. We're trying to spread the word about good security policies, good security recommendations. We are producing reports. We're going, and we have a magazine that we're starting to put articles out. So we're trying to be part of the solution. Please feel free to join. And if you guys have any questions, get out of the way of the pictures, it's not about me. Anybody have any questions, I'll field those. And are we doing time, or are my no questions? All right, got time if there's some questions. I may or may not have answers, but I'd certainly entertain it. Yes, sir. Wow. I'll slip you the 100 after. No. So he asked, you know, what does alert logic do? As you notice, I didn't talk about that at all. Alert Logic is a managed security service provider, and we help especially focused on the cloud. So we do security as a service, managed services. We have some products and tools that are homegrown and built basically for our SOC analysts, but customers liked it and we ended up agreeing to sell it and that sort of thing. So we have products and services that mostly are about managed security services. We do on-prem and cloud, but try to focus on cloud. And if you want to hear more, we could definitely talk a little bit more, talk about some of the products and stuff. Great question. Best question I've ever had. Is there any others? Yes, sir.
You mentioned on data classification doing it red, yellow, green, and then you said that wasn't quite the same as confidential secret and top secret. Is there a map?
Yeah, so the question is, I mentioned red, yellow, green, and then I was trying to take the pressure off of people to think that they had to be as regimented and defined as top secret, secret, and confidential. So the question was, is there, you know, sort of a formula, a one-to-one comparison? And you can find some things online. I'm sure there's some templates for some of those types of things, but there's not a clear delineation. And the main point of that was to say that it doesn't have to fall in those kinds of categories that we're used to or we've heard of from DoD and that sort of thing. It's a great standard and it's a great way to start. But companies that feel like they have to be so regimented in that usually take on a data classification project that lasts too long and ends up being a bad thing more than a good thing. And then when you have that conversation with somebody and say, hey, you done data classification? They're like, yes, and we stopped, and we're never doing it again, you know, sort of thing. So we can make it easier on ourselves by thinking about it and easier to define terms where, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know, how many of you in here are still family tech support? We just had the holidays. Yeah, as you walked in the door, oh, so good to see you. Hey, my computer. Well, that whole idea, like, we need to be able to have a data classification system that you can explain to the people that ask you for family tech support. That, to me, that's the goal, so that everybody can understand it, and it's not some mystery. Yes. Yes. So, that's very keen observation. The map, he asked about the map at the beginning. Russia didn't show up on the map as being red. And we know that they've been active in certain things, or allegedly, or I'm not sure, because it's being videoed. The reason it wasn't up there is because that was a map of targets, not of where the attacks were coming from. So it wasn't the attackers, it was, and the reason for that is we tried to track that. The reason for that is that they're stealthy on purpose. So trying to determine exactly where those attacks come from, right, preach to the choir, is difficult to the point where we don't feel like we have enough data to put that in a slide or state that it's true. More importantly, and what we've seen through our research team, is that we can identify groups or styles or technology tools being used in those attacks, and that's more useful information usually. So, any other questions? Good? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention.